work you do with, I believe you said, is it intellectual disabilities?
Mm, so my daughter is now 20 years old. When she was born, she was a perfect bundle of joy. Um, Only thing unique about her, she had a birthmark splotched in the middle of her face. Other
Okay.
than that, she looked like all the other children in my family that had been born. But there were things about my daughter that were different. She didn't get on a sleep schedule like most of the children in our family until she was like 4 months old, which was very bizarre to me. She was still getting up at night. She wouldn't hold her own bottle, even though it was like you're big enough. You everybody else that's 4 months older in our family does. She wasn't hitting the milestones in the same way compared to her peers, cousins, my friends' children. But when a child is so young, you just kind of are on a waiting to see basis. She was healthy, never had a cold, never had anything. One day, me and my ex-husband, we went to Ponderosa. That's how you know how long ago this was. And she
Ooh,
wouldn't put her
I
she
love
wouldn't
some
put her foot
Ponderosa.
down on
I'm
the
sorry.
ground. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
she wouldn't put her foot down on the ground. And I was like, what's wrong with her? Why won't she put her foot on the ground? We went to the emergency room. They did an x-ray. They gave her Tylenol. She started running around the emergency room. About a week later, she wouldn't put her foot on the ground again. Took her to her pediatrician. They do ultrasound, do all this blood work. I get a phone call at my job that I was on for 20 years, but back then she was 17 months old, and they said we got her lab results back, and it looks like she has cancer, and they're waiting for you at St. Louis Children's Hospital. I dropped the phone, ran out of work, went and got my baby from the babysitter, took her to the hospital, and we went on a 3.5 year journey of chemotherapy. She was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It was considered high risk because all of the normal bone marrow had left out of her leg and had completely filled up with leukemia cells, and that's the reason she wouldn't put her foot on the ground because the leukemia cells were basically pushing on her bone.
Mm,
We were told at the time a lot of the medication that she was receiving would possibly cause intellectual disabilities, but it saved the child. We could deal with
right.
what's left. We have to save the child. She was
Exactly.
getting chemotherapy around her brain every week for the whole time she was on treatment because the type of cancer that she had hides in the central nervous system. So when you get one lumbar puncture, they tell you you may get a learning disability. But she was getting them done every week, so it increased the likelihood of her having intellectual difficulties and intellectual disability.
Yeah.
However, after she was off of chemotherapy and her hair grows back and we start school, she still wasn't meeting certain milestones. My mother is a retired special education teacher. She taught special education for 45 years. She was like, she's old enough now. She was just about to be 4 that we could get her an evaluation. At that time, they diagnosed her as a young child with a developmental delay. She went to an inclusion class where half the kids had disabilities, half the kids didn't have disabilities because it's been proven that when children with disabilities have positive behaviors and what are considered typical behaviors to model, then they pick those skills up as
Mm,
well.
okay.
But otherwise, she had been healthy, 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 healthy. 14 years old, she started having seizures. Well, I had lost a child previously to a seizure
Mm,
when he was 3 months old. So that was the most terrifying thing that ever happened to me.
sorry for your loss.
Um, but her epilepsy presented with violence before she would have a seizure. Now, my Serpy sweet, beautiful child became violent using foul language. And in the black community, when you hit your mama, you die.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
she's a very small person. She probably looks like she's about 12 right now. So she's a very small person. So she was hitting me, and I'm like, I know your mind have to be to left you or something is wrong. Something has to be wrong. People at the hospital, her cancer was like a zebra. So they were trying to tie everything that she was experiencing to side effects for the medication that she had received. And I'm like, but that's not lining up with what you all know the side effects to be. Something else has to be wrong. I went on a 2 year journey of fighting with St. Louis Children's Hospital and their racist system.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Basically, doctors telling me I was lying because her epilepsy does not present in a way that anybody else's epilepsy does. She walks, she talks, and is in full motion while she's having a seizure. Um,
All right. We
Right,
back. We back
that's
cooking,
bad.
y'all. All
it
right.
just, well, St. Louis Children's Hospital, I believe, is a racist system because I don't look like the education. I don't look like the profession. I was black. I have blue hair. I have very urban, delightful fingernails. And I was advocating for my child whose um, symptoms were not presenting as anything that they had ever seen before.
Okay.
So basically, what happened for 2 years, they told me I was a liar. Because when somebody tells you that they don't believe what you are saying is true, then that means that they're saying that you're lying. Meanwhile, my child was deteriorating. We had a seizure fall, broke a collarbone, all of that. Fast forward, they finally sent us to genetics because somebody decided to listen to me one day when I said that my son had passed away from a seizure. And they said, well, it might be something genetic going on if you already have lost a child to epilepsy. Um, Genetics came back and they said she was missing part of her third chromosome in the ZBTB20 region. Um, that region causes a condition called Primrose syndrome. It's a very rare genetic condition. There are approximately 100 people in the whole entire world that have that condition.
Wow.
There, at the time she was diagnosed, she was the only known African American that carried that diagnosis in the United States. We have located 3 children that were in Africa. She does not fit the profile of a person that would receive a diagnosis of Primrose syndrome.
Okay.
I am of the belief that there are tons of other children that look just like my child that have that same condition, but somebody isn't listening to their parent. Um, all of the persons that have Primrose syndrome have intellectual disability. 12% of them have epilepsy, 70% of them have autism. Those are all things that are impacted in our house. They also have unspecified mood disorders. Um, they will, it's a progressive condition, so as she gets older, more things will occur. In the process of trying to get her health in order, I get frustrated with the education system. I'm trying to find a way to fight back because I was finding that her white counterparts, when we would go to different events, their parents would have access to all these services. And it seemed that her case managers and caseworkers were holding on or gatekeeping resources. When in reality, I found out that when I start advocating for persons with intellectual disabilities, that the turnover rate is so high in the industry. It wasn't that they were gatekeeping, they didn't stay on the job long enough to even find out if the resources existed.
Wow.
And
That's
that's kind
crazy.
of what sent me on the journey to being appointed by the governor, now in my second term on the Missouri Developmental Disabilities Council. At the time I was appointed, there was only one other person of color on the council that was providing voice to children and young adults and elder adults with intellectual disabilities and how money was spent on programming on their behalf. I am now currently the only African American parent stakeholder that sits on the council.
And let's take time to big
That's
you up
deep.
on that right there, because that is
That's deep.
definitely
That's a lot to process too.
for sure, for sure. And we definitely need more people of color in those rooms because listen, they will uh skip over us, they will overlook us, until we get somebody that's gonna make them take accountability. You know what I'm saying? So